join us. For those Hi, everybody, and welcome back. In this session, I'll be discussing the real science of neuroplasticity and the ADHD brain with the cognitive psychologist, Dr. Amy Moore. Dr. Moore, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me today, Sheila.
It's such an honor. Thank you so much for deciding to join us. For those people who haven't met you before, Dr. Moore, can you share a couple of words and tell us more about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So I'm a cognitive psychologist and the director of psychology and research at LearningRx World Headquarters in Colorado Springs, Colorado. We are the headquarters of the largest global network of cognitive training centers over in 43 countries. I'm also a board-certified Christian counselor, a TEDx speaker, a podcaster. I host the podcast, The Brainy Moms. And I was an educator before I became a psychologist. So I have a master's degree in early childhood education. My PhD is in cognitive psychology. And I've been working with neurodivergent kids and their families for more than 30 years. I have 3 adult children, 2 of which have ADHD themselves. And I am an ADHD mom and a mom with ADHD. So I live and breathe this and I have lived and breathed it for a lifetime.
Right. And that's why we absolutely love having you over, because I think this topic is just so new and so fresh, and I cannot wait to tackle it. Let's start off with that, Dr. Moore. And I think it was one of your TEDx talks that you said that we are not stuck with the cognitive cards we've been dealt. And I think that's just such a beautiful line. It's reassuring. But in the same breath, you've also said that, of course, there is no cure for ADHD and that the ADHD brain has a measurable physical abnormalities. So can you explain that to us? Which one is it? Are we rewriting the cards that we've been dealt, or are we just playing them better as we go along?
Yes, that's my answer. Right, yeah. So to hold those 2 ideas in tension, can be kind of hard, right? But when we think about ADHD, it's a collection of symptoms, and it shows up a little bit differently in everyone who has it. So some people really wrestle with the cognitive impact of ADHD, and others really wrestle with the emotion dysregulation aspect of ADHD, right? So the etiology is diverse, and so is the symptomology. Our symptoms are all a little bit different. So when I talk about not being stuck with the cognitive cards we've been dealt, that means that because of neuroplasticity, because the brain has this amazing capacity to change with targeted experience, we can improve cognitive deficits. So we can improve working memory, long-term memory, processing speed, attention, visual and auditory processing, reasoning. We can improve executive function skills. But that doesn't cure ADHD, right? We still are going to wrestle with some of those deficits. We're still going to wrestle with emotion dysregulation, with rejection-sensitive dysphoria, with motor planning issues that are frequently co-occurring, with sensory processing issues that are frequently co-occurring, right? So, we know about 70% of people with ADHD have a comorbid diagnosis of something else: anxiety, OCD, depression. So training weak cognitive skills lessens the struggle cognitively and thinking and learning, but it doesn't cure the disorder.
Right. Before we go on with this session, I just wanted to remind you that you can still upgrade to the Summit's VIP Pass. Beside the lifetime access to all the sessions, you also get the audio files, you get the workbook for each session, you get the expert action blueprint with key takeaways from each masterclass, you get the English subtitles, and really a bunch of other things that will save you tons of time and really make a huge difference with your kid and with your family relationships. So if you're a busy parent and you want to get the most out of the Summit, then I really encourage you to find the button somewhere on this page and go check it out. You can still get access at a discounted price before our Summit ends. And now, let's get you back to the program. And you were mentioning, working memory, processing speed, long-term memory. Those were actually the weakest skills in ADHD, and not the attention, like we said earlier. So let's say that the parent listening to this right now has a teen who just got ADHD diagnosis, and they are walking out of the office with the label that, of course, first and foremost points to attention, and a prescription most of the time that targets attention. So if your data is right, if the skills that are missing are not attention at all, that entire visit may have aimed at the wrong target, if I understand this correctly. So can you help us out? What did that family actually miss, and what they should have been tested for instead of that narrow intention skill?
So I think this starts with the idea that attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is probably the wrong name for the disorder, because we don't have a deficit of attention. We actually have too much attention. We can't, right? We don't pay attention to the most relevant piece of information in our environment. We pay attention to everything. The ADHD brain really struggles to rack and stack priorities and importance. And so it's kind of a misnomer to think that we have a deficit of attention. So for years, we have assumed from research that stimulant medication is directly targeting attention. And recent research is showing us that it's actually targeting reward salience and motivation. So it's actually helping the ADHD brain pay attention and focus on what is most salient, right? What is reward driven, so that the brain isn't constantly looking for something more rewarding, right? So our attention drifts. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with walking out of the psychiatrist's office with a prescription that targets attention, because there's so much research support for medication, so much research support. Now, we still have to look at, what did that neuropsych test report say in the middle, right? Typically, we just look at what the diagnosis is. We flip to the end of that 30, 40-page report where it says, here's our recommendation. Typically, that includes medication. But what did those individual cognitive skills look like? What did that cognitive skill profile look like? Were there deficits in memory? Were there deficits in processing speed? Maybe even visual processing? What were the actual symptom profile for that individual? Then we need to say, hey, does this medication target that? And if it doesn't, then we need to look at interventions that do, if we want to impact change in that ADHD brain. It has to be individualized, right? So we can't just walk out thinking that medication is this silver bullet that fixes everything, right? And the reality is that all medication has side effects, all. And so are there other things that we can do to optimize brain health before we try medication, or in addition to medication, because maybe that will create an environment in the brain that optimizes how well it works too.
Brilliant. As a cognitive psychologist, you tested, I think it was 130,000 brains. Do I have that number right?
Well, I personally have not tested 130,000 brains, right? So our organization has worked with 130,000 people and given cognitive tests. So I've analyzed all that data.
Brilliant. However, for 3 years, when you raised your son, Evan, and when you raised his spelling rates at every parents teacher conference, every time the teachers told you, he's going to catch up. So can we try and tell the parent watching right now about this discrepancy, about the trust? At what point do you stop trusting the school, the teachers, of what the school is telling you, and start kind of trusting your gut like you did?
Sure. So there was older research that suggested that all kids catch up by 3rd grade, so let's not worry about it. That they all sort of develop at different speeds. And so by 3rd grade, if we're all reading, then we're good. I did this really fascinating study a few years ago where I looked at the cognitive profiles of kids with reading disability. And what it showed was, in the absence of an intervention, their weak skills, their weak auditory processing skills, along with some other cognitive skills, continued to decline in the absence of an intervention. So they didn't just stay the same. They got worse. And so as a parent, if we notice a struggle, we need to act on that struggle. Now, does that mean that everyone needs all of the interventions possible all at the same time? No. But what it does do is raise a red flag, says, my child is having a struggle. My child is struggling with those basic auditory processing skills, phonological awareness skills. So I need to intervene. I need to do something for my child so that it doesn't continue to get worse. Because the reality is, by the time my son was in 4th grade, he could not even spell his own middle name.
Wow.
He didn't catch up.
Right. So we need to be, because it does continue to decline. That's definitely something to be addressed by parents. In one of your interviews, you shared that you don't actually remember your son's baseline scores. At that time, you said you weren't acting like a researcher. You were, of course, acting like a mother. So as a mother, not a clinician, can you help us understand what do you think that was the single best variable in terms of why it worked for him at that point?
Sure. So I remember his baseline scores. I just don't remember how much he gained, right, on an official cognitive test. Because what I knew was my child is in 4th grade and he cannot spell, and 9 months later he could, and that was the goal, right, of going through the Redirect intervention. I think the difference is, the science of reading tells us that the structured literacy approach to reading instruction matches how the brain learns to read. But the problem with that is, we have schools who are using curriculum that follows the science of reading that is a structured literacy approach, but we still only have about 30% of American students who are proficient in reading. So there's a gap, there's a mismatch there. And so it's my contention that if we don't address the underlying cognitive skill deficits, those cognitive skills of auditory processing, visual processing, memory, attention, processing, speed, reasoning, if we don't address those deficits, those serve as the foundation for those reading skills. So if you think of that reading pyramid, cognitive skills are at the base of the pyramid. And so we can do all of the structured literacy instruction in the world, but if we're instructing children with weak cognitive skills, it's not going to move the needle. And so the reason why I think Evan went from not being able to spell his own name in 4th grade to being gifted in talented language arts by 7th grade and college by 9th grade was because we had to strengthen those cognitive skill deficits first before the structured literacy intervention or reading program could work.
Brilliant. And let's talk about the training, the real brain training. You say that it cannot happen on the screen, that a real brain training has to be human, across the table, building a relationship with a trainee, with someone. But building a relationship itself is kind of abstract for the parents whose teen doesn't want to talk to them, barely, looks up when they're from their phone when they're having dinner. There's no connection there. So can you be specific and advise us of an activity? Like what does a mom and her 15-year-old actually do that kind of builds that kind of bond or brain that you're talking about?
Yeah, so I think we might be talking about two different things. That one, in the cognitive training environment, having a human cognitive trainer instead of a laptop is a key component because a human cognitive trainer can assess frustration, pull back a little bit, let you experience some success, and then stretch you a little bit. High fives, encouragement, verbal persuasion, all of those sources of self-efficacy development that human trainer can provide that a laptop can't. And we know that if we're playing a computer game, even a brain training game on a computer, and we get frustrated, what do? We turn it off. Yeah, exactly. Well, we can't hit our cognitive trainer and we can't turn off our human cognitive trainer, right? So that's important to keep us motivated, right? To have that human interaction. And so that's what I'm referring to when I talk about that can't happen with a computer screen, right? We can't approximate that relationship that humans can have. But in terms of creating that relationship at home, we have to have this detective hat on as parents all of the time. We have to constantly be looking for opportunities to connect with our child based on their interests, based on what's important to them, with the understanding that teens especially are motivated by 3 basic psychological needs. And that is the need for autonomy and control, the need for mastery or competence, and the need for connection and relatedness. That's self-determination theory. Lots of research to support that. And so when we recognize, okay, my child is pushing back because he doesn't feel like he has enough autonomy here or control here, how can I give him some autonomy and control? Or maybe my child is not feeling connected, so how can I step into that space or create those invitations? Or my child is frustrated because he doesn't have the skills to do this homework, right? So his need for competence and mastery is not being met, right? So how do I help identify those skill gaps and then step into that place and provide those things for him? And so if we look at it from, hey, does my child have an unmet need and how can I meet it? And I know my child has that basic need for connection. It's very different than us just trying to orchestrate our teens' lives and expect them to respond.
Much more complex, yeah. Got it. Okay, let's move now to the therapeutic sessions. You said that the number one predictor of the success of the therapy is the relationship with the trainer itself. You just said we can shut down the computer, we cannot shut down the relationship as fast. So if a parent is sitting across from a tutor or from a coach, trying to decide if this is the right relationship, the right person for their teen, what would you say? What are they actually looking for? What's this green flag in the first couple of minutes that parents tell this is the right coach for my teen?
Sure. So I think there are 2 things. One is rapport, that initial interaction, right, with the trainer or the tutor or whoever you're considering helping your child. Do they have that warmth, that unconditional positive regard? Do they seem to have empathy for the struggle? So that rapport is pretty instant. You can tell almost right away, right, if they're going to connect. But the other green flag is this professional or clinician or tutor using research-based practices, right? Are they showing you peer-reviewed research on their specific intervention? Not saying, hey, this is based on research out there, but saying, here is my research, here is our research on this intervention. So those are the green flags, research and rapport.
Well, love that. And what about on the flip side, the red flags? What's the thing that parents sees in that first meeting that should make them walk out no matter how good the research-based promo is? What's the red flag?
Yeah, so a red flag to me would be a one-size-fits-all approach, right? That the person is coming to you with a canned intervention. This is how we do it from start to finish, and there's no individualization. That is a red flag to me. And then a lack of empathy is the other red flag. If you are going to work with a struggling child or teen, you have to have empathy.
Agree on that. Okay, let's get a bit more specific because I want parents listening to actually kind of picture what happens inside of your one of your brain training session, and I think it's remarkable. Like you said, you're a director of psychology and research at Learning RX, and it is, like you said, the largest network of cognitive training in the world.
Yes,
I believe that's so remarkable to have here. And your method is very particular. Can you explain us how does a session inside of training looks like?
Yeah. So our methodology is based on the idea that cognitive training needs to be intense. It needs to be complex because thinking and cognition is complex. It has to be paced. And it has to be sequenced. So we sequence it in order of a little bit easier to very difficult and very complex. And so it's very hands-on. So we use workboards and cards and tangrams and manipulatives so that we're not only using our brains, but we're using our hands as well. And so we create what we like to call a mental sweat. So we go from one training task, it's mental tasks that are game-like. And so we go from one task to the next, to the next, to the next with no breaks in between unless a client needs a break. But typically we push it to keep those 90-minute sessions really intense. We have over 100 different tasks that we can use to train cognitive skills. And each of those tasks has 10 to 12 variations. So really we have about 1,000 different ways that we can train. And we use a metronome. And so we pace the tasks with a metronome. And so typically when we're doing a task, the client is either responding on beat to the metronome or we add a task on top of a task. So for example, we could be doing a working memory training task where we've got a workboard with cards that have shapes that are different colors, sizes, and orientations. And so the cognitive trainer will create a pattern on their side of the desk, allow the client to study it for 3 seconds and then cover it up. And the client has to recreate that pattern on their side, right? But at the same time, we have a metronome ticking and they're doing another task while they're doing the working memory task. So it may be counting by threes. It may be reciting the presidents in order because that is a memory task that we've already trained early on in their program. So you can see that we just layer upon layer. Exactly. But we don't do this training in quiet private offices. It's an open room so that that's how the world works. The world is full of noise and external stimuli. And so in order for us to really train focus and attention skills, we do it in a room with other people training at desks nearby. So it's lively, it's engaging, it's full of that really neat human interaction, but also intense and complex at the same time.
So when you're mentioning metronomes, other people, there's also singing offbeat, cracking jokes. That's trainers deliberately trying to distract the team from the actual task, right?
Yes.
That really is. Why is that important?
Because that forces focus, right? I'm trying to tune out those distractions so that I can work on my sustained attention skills and my divided attention skills. So it trains focus. That's how the real world is. We have to tune out distractions in order to do our work or to focus on what it is that we're doing. So instead of removing distractions, we're doing the opposite. We are implementing deliberate distractions to help train that focus.
Amazing. A couple of questions are raising here when you say that. First is a lot of ADHD teens are also anxious, and you were mentioning comorbidities in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them are sensory sensitive. We talked about that as well. So how do you screen, on day one, whether that room full of this distraction and a lot going on, if that room is going to challenge a kid to a point that he's going to focus, that the challenge that you want, or is that going to even push him further down and break him?
Sure. So our goal is never to break a child. And so, right. So our trainers are trained to look for that frustration tolerance threshold. And so we want to keep every client underneath that threshold. And occasionally we find it, and that's okay. We'll pull back. We do have individual training rooms with doors. And so there are some clients who do need to do their initial training sessions in a quiet room because of sensory issues, because of sensory overwhelm. And so maybe they do 10 minutes of training in the big room and the rest of their session in a quiet office. And then we gradually build up so that they can begin to tune out all of that sensory input from the environment. And the same thing with anxiety, right? So we spend time meeting with the family, we meet with the teen, so we really get to know what those pain points are so that we can individualize the program so it works for them.
Okay. Another discrepancy that I want us to tackle. You criticize school for giving ADHD teens quiet testing rooms, but you say that the real word you just mentioned is loud. It's definitely not calm. It's hectic. We all live in it. So we should train in loud rooms, like you just mentioned. But at home, you also tell parents to put their kids in cool, dark, quiet rooms to rest, to sleep, and to modify this sensory environment to prevent further meltdowns. Why is this environmental accommodation wrong at school, but right at home?
So let me just clarify that I'm not criticizing schools for doing that. What I'm saying is that doesn't treat the root cause of the problem. It just accommodates it. And that's okay to accommodate the need for less distraction, but then we'll just have to continue to accommodate it. It doesn't actually fix the problem. It doesn't train the skill that needs to be trained so that we can function in a more distracting environment. But I encourage optimal sleep environments because sleep is very different than thinking and learning. So the analogy I would give is that we don't play ice hockey on the beach and we don't play beach volleyball on an ice rink. Right? They're two different activities, so they need two different environments. And so in order to optimize sleep, we know that a colder temperature helps. We know that sleeping with a light on impacts our melatonin release. So sleeping in a cool, dark room just optimizes sleep health. And sleep is vitally important for the brain. It's like putting our brain through a car wash. We have this really neat system called the glymphatic system. And when we sleep, it releases cerebrospinal fluid that cleanses the brain of waste products that build up during the day. So we want to be able to optimize sleep. And so that's why it's different.
Right. Now let's start with a whole other topic, because I believe parents hearing that, they do get excited. It sounds like a novelty. And I am excited just by listening to it. But we have to be real that most parents aren't going to be able to drive their team to a learning RX center, like most of the time. Like either they cannot afford it, it's not nowhere near them. A lot of parents are not even from the US, or their team just wouldn't see through any of that anyways. What would you say? What's the one thing a parent and their team can do today using similar principle of this paced, mildly chaotic challenge to start building their working memory or processing speed?
Yeah. Well, first, let me just say that we also train over Zoom. So we did an amazing study during COVID. We've published it in a peer-reviewed journal that showed that the outcomes from training over Zoom were not statistically significantly different than the outcomes from training at a center. And we are in 43 countries. So whether we live near a center or not, we can come right into the dining room table over Zoom and train there. So just let me clarify that. So one of the things that I always encourage families to have is a game closet because board games engage cognitive skills. And so stack that with a variety of games. My favorite is Bop It because it engages processing speed. It engages auditory processing skills, working memory, attention. It even engages our reasoning because we have to come up with a strategy for how we're going to twist it, hit it, right, pass it. And so it engages so many cognitive skills at a rapid pace. So board games and memory games and visual Spot It games all engage our cognitive skills. And they increase connection and relatedness when we're doing that with our kids. And so that's the number one thing that I tell parents to do is engage with their children, have a board game closet with as many possible games as you can. And we actually have a spreadsheet that we give away for free that lists a bunch of board games and the cognitive skills that they can engage. But the reality is we can't expect parents to deliver a therapeutic intervention themselves, just like occupational therapy, speech therapy, mental health therapy, right? I mean, if that is not what they're trained to do, we don't know if it can move the needle, if board games alone can move the needle on true cognitive skill deficits. But everyone will benefit from gameplay.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to ask. Like, how does a parent know whether it's actually working if I'm doing all this cognitive work? But yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Dr. Moore, if I refer back to the relationship with the trainer that we talked about it earlier. So in this case, if the relationship with the trainer is the most important, could a deeply attuned tutor with no metronome and no curriculum of your own get similar results just by being consistent and showing up for the team?
No, because an intervention still has to be targeted. So when we look at that research on that is mental health therapeutic research. So it's called the Therapeutic Alliance or the Collaborative Alliance. And so a mental health professional can use any therapeutic approach, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, talk therapy, right? They're using an approach that is research based that they've been thoroughly trained in when they got their master's degree or PhD. But what that research shows is that relationship, that rapport, that collaborative dynamic is the most important predictor of whether the patient stays in therapy, completes therapy, and engages in therapy. But it's still therapy. So if we apply that to the cognitive training environment, what I'm relating that to is we can't create a collaborative relationship or a collaborative alliance with a computer game. It has to be with a human, but it's still a research-based cognitive training intervention, right?
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. You kind of referring back to the environmental accommodation that we were discussing earlier. Something else popped up because you said that giving an ADHD teen extra time on a test in school doesn't really fix anything. It kind of removes the friction that we were just talking about, right? However, isn't that actually what every adult accommodation looks like with our calendars, with our reminders, noise canceling headphones, Grammarly, AI, whatever? Adults with ADHD survive by removing all of that friction. So can you explain us why is the strategy at 35 at adults so different, than at 15?
Sure. So the extra time on test, I think I said it reduces motivation because, right, so, but I mean, it could reduce some friction too, right? But what happens is, and this is what research is showing, what happens is when we give teens or kids extra time on tests, kids with ADHD don't use that time strategically. They don't have the executive function skills to plan, how do I use this time? Time pressure actually engages the attention circuits in the brain. So having a deadline actually helps us meet the deadline. When we stretch that deadline, right, it reduces the motivation to get it done. It doesn't engage those attention circuits. And what research is showing is the kids with the most severe ADHD symptoms use it worse. Like it actually reduces their ability to meet that deadline when it's stretched further out. And then the other issue is it doesn't address the cognitive deficits, right? It's just, again, it accommodates the issue, but has very little research support for it. So it's very interesting that schools continue to use it. In terms of adults, we do use external supports. So if adults have not gone through cognitive training to remediate their cognitive skill deficits, then you do need external memory supports and attention supports or visual processing supports, right? Like they use calendars so that they don't forget things. And that's okay, right? Adults learn how to accommodate. They've had their struggles long enough that they've figured out, okay, what external supports do I need in order to survive in the real world? But again, that doesn't remediate anything. It is accommodating it. But the difference is motivation, right? Adults are using these external supports because they have real world deadlines, right? And very few bosses are going to say, sure, you can have an extra 2 weeks because you have ADHD.
Yeah, sure. Love it. Never thought of it that way. It's a whole other lens. Thank you for it. Okay, let's talk about the superpower. Because I think that a lot of ADHD, some of it embrace it, but a lot of people are just really, really get a tick about it. You call the social media trend of labeling neurodivergence a superpower quite dangerous. So can you walk us through why, and who specifically you think is being harmed by that framing ADHD being a superpower?
Yeah, so I think there are two issues at play. One is when we say ADHD is a superpower, we're minimizing the struggle. We're not recognizing the true struggle that someone with ADHD has all day, every day, when we just call it a superpower. And the other issue is, if I say to my child, you have ADHD, that's a superpower, and that child is continuing to struggle and fail at things, then they also think they're failing at being a superpower or being a superhero. Right? It's a double whammy effect there. And I think that the heart behind it is okay, right? I think that they're trying to make you feel okay with having a brain that works a little bit differently. The reality is ADHD is not a superpower, but you can have superpowers even though you have ADHD, and that's what we need to lean into. We need to say, what are our child's strengths? How can we nurture those strengths so that they can feel like, yes, my superpower is I'm an incredible friend, or my superpower is I'm really great at rock climbing, right? But ADHD itself is not a superpower, and it's just dangerous, I think, emotionally to carry that label. It's a hard label. Those are big shoes to fill, and the reality is we can't.
Yeah, that's so beautifully said. And when you hear, when a teen hears some of their favorite people or TikTokers, or somebody they really look upon to call their ADHD superpower, what should they be hearing instead? What should you actually want to hear from your parent?
Yeah, I think that you want to hear, hey, you did a great job today on the soccer field. I'm so impressed with your ability to read the game, right? To read the field, to anticipate the next move. You did such a great job studying for that math test. You should be proud that you've gone from a C to a B in 3 months because of these new strategies that you've been using. And so I think parents need to be very specific about those successes when they give that positive feedback and praise, so that it's based on accomplishment and effort and attitude and what they've actually done, rather than just thinking, okay, I have a superpower here with ADHD. And the thing is, I always say own it or don't. I own it. I call myself an ADHD warrior. So that can still be a strong visual, right? A warrior, but it also shows there's a battle to be fought.
Yeah, there is some struggle behind it. There is some challenge. Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that. Lastly, you said that neuroplasticity makes change possible at any age, right? Which we love to hear that in theory, but let's be honest with the parent watching this whose teen maybe turns 18 this year. The college acceptance letter is already put there on the fridge. The window everyone keeps talking about feels like it's just like a gap this big. It's closing tonight. With 1 year left at 17, what can brain training actually deliver, and why can it not?
Yeah, so we have two windows of extreme neuroplasticity, right? So early childhood and adolescence. And the reality is that adolescent window doesn't close until the mid to late 20s. So 18 is not the end of that adolescent neuroplastic window. And so that's the good news. And we have lots and lots of clients in college, right, who have gotten there. They've realized that, hey, I had a very structured childhood, right? I went to a very structured school. I had a structured after school time with my parents. I played sports, and I managed to get through. And now that I'm headed to college, I don't have the same structure. So that really puts this magnifying glass on those cognitive skill deficits. So that's an ideal time to strengthen them. Right. And we do start to lose neuroplasticity right after that, but we do hold on to some. So it just works a little bit differently, and it's a little bit harder to move the needle on changing the brain right after the late 20s, but we do it all the time.
Brilliant. So inspiring to hear. Okay, for the end, let's move to the rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Cool. The most underrated cognitive skill nobody trains.
Metacognition, that ability to monitor our own struggles, how we're understanding what's happening in the moment, our interoception, right? Like what are those signals inside of our body saying to us? Are we, thirsty, hungry, tired? Do we need to go to the bathroom? Just that ability to think about our thinking, metacognition, we forget about sometimes, and it's critical.
That's so true. I haven't thought about that. See, the skill parents waste the most money trying to fix.
I would say either standalone auditory processing training, because there's always something else happening when we have an auditory processing deficit, and so we miss those other skills when we just do standalone. And then the other one would be that hemisphere integration training. There just isn't enough research on the interventions out there to support spending the money on those.
Point. Thank you. 8 hours of sleep beats any stimulant, yes or no?
So the research is ongoing, and there actually is some research that compares sleep to stimulant because they actually have the same benefit. They act on that same system in the brain. But sleep actually fixes some of the issues, whereas medication just manages it, right? So that dopamine system, sleep can actually fix. And sleep has no side effects. So I would lean on trying optimizing sleep first.
Beautiful. The sport that builds an ADHD brain faster than any other.
Taekwondo.
Really?
There's so much research on Taekwondo and ADHD. So it is fast moving. There's this constant threat monitoring. There's sequential motor planning going on, and there's this when you're sparring. There's that immediate feedback loop, right? That like where's my body in space? How do I need to move next? I have to really focus on what's happening, especially during sparring. So definitely, that's called an open skill sport, Taekwondo.
Wow. Gluten causes brain fog in teens. Yes or no?
Maybe. If you have gluten sensitivity or celiac disease, there are absolutely documented neurological manifestations of gluten sensitivity and celiac, and brain fog is one of those neurological manifestations. So it's really important to know if your child or teen has food allergies or food sensitivities because it could be contributing to their ADHD symptoms.
Right. Video games as cognitive training. Never? Sometimes or yes?
I would say sometimes. So there's lots of research on gameplay. And so we know that it can engage processing speed and visual processing and attention skills and working memory skills. And so just like word games and fast-moving games that you can play IRL in real life, video games can engage those same cognitive skills. Can they remediate them? The research is kind of iffy on that, but they absolutely can engage it. We just have to be careful to monitor the amount so that we don't land in video game addiction.
Yoga for an ADHD teen. Is that useful or useless?
It can be useful, especially a meditative type. So there's some research that suggests that it can be calming, especially for teens struggling with hyperactivity, but it can increase some attention skills as well. And plus it's movement. Movement's always good.
Always good for ADHD brain. Right. The card or board game. Every ADHD family should own. Is that Bop?
Definitely Bop It. Yeah, definitely Bop It.
Okay. Any others?
So Simon is great. Simon, has processing speed and working memory and visual processing. And it really depends on which kind of skill you want to engage. So chess is amazing for engaging reasoning skills and long-term memory, right? That pattern anticipation and recognition. But all games are going to engage something, right? Some cognitive skills and increases connection and relatedness.
Beautiful. And the last one, coffee at 14. Green light, yellow light, or red?
Yellow light. So the research is ongoing. And so probably a single cup of coffee with no sugar added is probably okay, but we really don't know what the safe level of caffeine is for kids. Green tea is probably better. There's some research that suggests that combination of caffeine and L-theanine can be good for ADHD symptoms. The risk here is sleep disruption. And so we already struggle with sleep in ADHD. We've talked a lot about the importance of sleep and the benefits of sleep. And so that's really where it's a caution light there. And most teens who drink coffee add a whole bunch of sugar to it. And so sugar, there's a lot of research on sugar and ADHD symptoms. There's some research that shows there's no connection, right? But there is research that shows a pattern. And the other thing is sugar is inflammatory. And so if sugar's creating inflammation in our body, it's creating inflammation in our brains, which makes it harder for our neurons to communicate. The ADHD brain already has, a struggle with neuronal communication. Let's not add to it.
Yeah, well, brilliant, Dr. Moore. This was such an inspiring conversation. Would you like, to add something, or what would you like to share with parents, or definitely where can they reach you in your trainings?
Yeah, so you can find me at my podcast, The Brainy Moms. So we're on social media at The Brainy Moms or thebrainymoms.com. My website is amymorephd.com, and you can learn everything you could possibly want to know about neuroplasticity and cognitive training at learningrx.com, and that's where I'm the director of psychology and research. So all of our peer-reviewed research is available there as well.
And there's a book that you have, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's called Hearts on ADHD Parenting, Brain-Based, Grace-Filled Strategies for Raising Kids with Big Emotions and Challenging Behaviors. And so all the information on that is also on my website.
Thank you so much for shedding a light on all of this. I truly believe that our conversation here is gives families a lot of more clarity to stop maybe accommodating this struggle and start training and stressing them through it. I love this conversation. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me, Sheila.
Take care. Are you loving the advice and insights you're getting? Well, you can get lifetime access to all the summit sessions